mind, I realised something that made my skin crawl. Both times, I hadn't seen him blink, not once. When I opened the door, he smiled for the first time. Not wide, just enough to show his teeth. No food this time, he said quietly. Just wanted to see if you were home. The man from before, his coat brushing against the wall as he walked, his steps slow, deliberate, keeping pace with me. Even though I couldn't see him, I risked a glance over my shoulder. She stopped halfway down the platform, standing in the dim light, watching. Hey, hello. Welcome to the channel. Today I have more scary stories from Reddit. We won't waste any time and we'll get straight to the first one. I hope you enjoy. I don't usually stop for gas at night. I know it sounds paranoid, but the way stations are lit, those cold fluorescent lights buzzing above rows of empty pumps, they feel like stages. Like if you stand there too long, someone you don't want watching will eventually step out of the shadows. But 2 months ago, I didn't have a choice. I was driving back from visiting my mum a couple of towns over. It was after 11, my gas light was on, and the only station still open was one of those older, half-forgotten ones. There was a single car parked at the far pump, beat up navy blue, looked like it hadn't been washed in years, and I didn't see anyone inside. I pulled up, swiped my card, and started fueling. That's when I noticed him. A man standing by the corner of the convenience store. He wasn't walking in. He wasn't leaning against the wall. He was just standing, his arms hung loose at his sides, staring in the general direction of the pumps. I tried not to look too long, but every few seconds I'd glance back. He wasn't moving, not even shifting his weight. He was just standing there, locked in place. When the tank finally clicked full, I pulled the nozzle out and tried to leave as casually as possible. But as I drove past, I couldn't help but look in. His head turned with my car, following me all the way out of the lot. I didn't tell anyone. Honestly, I thought I was just being jumpy. People loiter at gas stations all the time, right? Except a week later, I saw him again. It was broad daylight this time. Same station, same car at the pump, though I didn't see him get out of it. He was in the exact same spot, corner of the building, standing there. This time, he was looking downwards slightly, but I could feel his eyes on me as I walked into the store to grab a drink. I made it quick, paid in cash, left without even looking toward him. But as I walked past the window, I noticed his reflection in the glass. He had turned his head, following me again, just like before. That night, when I replayed it in my mind, I realised something that made my skin crawl. Both times, I hadn't seen him blink, not once. The third encounter cemented it. I wasn't even at the gas station. I was halfway across town, filling up at a newer chain. When I pulled in, I noticed a navy blue car 2 pumps away. Rust along the wheel well, same dent in the back bumper. I froze, and sure enough, there he was. Not standing by the store this time, standing between the pumps, like he hadn't even pretended to be a customer, just standing. his head slowly toward me, eyes fixed. I didn't finish pumping gas. I got back in the car, heart pounding, and drove off with the nozzle still hanging. The handle banged against the pump, and I half expected it to rip free, but I didn't care. I sped down the highway, checking my mirrors every 5 seconds, but the Navy car never pulled out behind me. That was a few weeks ago. Since then, I haven't been back to that side of town. I've switched stations, changed routines, even started fueling up during the day. But he's still there. Not every time, not even most times, but just enough that I know he's not random. Last night sealed it. I stopped at a station near my apartment, one I've been to dozens of times. It was late, but the lot was busy. I figured I was safe. As I pulled away from the pump, I glanced at the storefront and froze. He was inside this time, standing in one of the aisles, visible through the glass. His hands hung loosely at his sides, his head just slightly tilted, watching. He didn't pretend to shop. He didn't move at all. He just followed me with his eyes as I drove away. I don't know what he wants. I don't know how he knows where I'll be. It started so normal. I almost feel stupid even writing this down. I'd had one of those weeks at work where every day bled into the next. Long hours, little sleep, no motivation to cook. So I ordered takeout, Thai food from a place a couple of blocks away. I remember opening the door, seeing the delivery guy for the first time. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Thin, wiry build, a little hunched over, like his shoulders carried weight that wasn't visible. He had a cap pulled low and his delivery bag strapped tight across his chest. "Food for Daniel," he said. His voice was quiet, almost flat, like he was reading from a script. I took the bag, thanked him, handed him a tip, and that was it. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just stood there a second longer than he should have before finally leaving. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I was just hungry, and he was just another delivery guy. Over the next week, I ordered 3 more times from different restaurants. Chinese, pizza, even burgers. And every time, it was him. Same driver, same flat voice, same way of lingering at the door, like he was waiting for me to say something else. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence. Some drivers cover multiple restaurants through the apps, right? But after the 4th time, it felt deliberate. The little details started to bother me. He never carried his phone in his hand like most drivers do. His bag was always shut tight, not even unzipped until he was right at my door. And he always said my name before handing me the food, but in this strange, deliberate way, like he was reminding himself how to pronounce it. The second week, I started noticing something else. He wasn't just dropping the food and leaving. I'd see him through the peephole after I closed the door. He'd stand in the hall for a few seconds, staring at the door, before finally walking off. One night after he left, I went downstairs to throw out some trash. His car was parked at the far end of the lot. He was just sitting inside, engine off, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. He didn't move when I walked past. He didn't even I stopped ordering food altogether. It wasn't worth the pit in my stomach every time I opened the door and saw his face. But that didn't stop him from showing up. The first time, I just told myself it was a mistake. I knocked at my door, and there he was, holding a bag from a Mexican place I'd never even ordered from. I didn't order anything, I said. He looked down at the receipt stapled to the bag, then back at me. Daniel. My mouth went dry. Yeah, but I didn't order that. He just stood there, bag in hand, until I stepped back and shook my head. Finally, without a word, he turned and just left. 2 nights later, it happened again. Different food, different restaurant, still him. The third time, he didn't even bother with the bag. He just knocked and stood there, empty-handed, waiting. When I opened the door, he smiled for the first time. Not wide, just enough to show his teeth. No food this time, he said quietly. I just wanted to see if you were home. And then he left, calm as anything, walking back down the hall, like what he'd said wasn't deeply wrong. That's when I stopped sleeping. I pushed a chair under the doorknob and I kept the blinds shut tight. But he kept coming back. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps outside my door late at night, the faint scuff of shoes dragging across the carpet. Once I heard the sound of a plastic bag rustling, like it was holding food out there, waiting. The final night was the worst. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a delivery notification. My stomach dropped, I hadn't ordered anything. Then came the knock, soft, measured, like he knew I was standing on the other side, frozen. Daniel, he whispered. His voice was right against the door this time. You shouldn't eat alone. I don't remember making the decision. 1 second I was frozen. The next I was shoving my dresser in front of the door, grabbing my keys and climbing out of my bedroom window onto the fire escape. I stayed at a friend's place that night, and when we came back the next morning, the hallway outside my apartment reeked of spoiled food. Bags from half a dozen restaurants were lined up neatly against my door. Each one had my name written across the receipt in shaky, uneven writing. I moved out 2 weeks later, deleted the apps, and stopped ordering takeaway completely. Even now, I'll catch the faint whiff of a takeout on my doorstep when I get home late, and I wonder how far a person like this is willing to go when they've already crossed the line into obsession. I've lived in the same city for most of my life. It isn't the biggest, but it's old, with streets that twist around in ways that don't make sense, like they were laid out before maps were even a thing. For years, I worked late shifts at a small print shop downtown. When my car broke down, I started walking home. It wasn't far, maybe 30 minutes, but the route took me a stretch of blocks where the street lights never seemed to work. That's how I found the alley. It cut between 2 warehouses, narrow but paved, and it looked like it would save me 10 minutes. The first night I took it, everything seemed fine. The sound of the city, cars, sirens, music bleeding out wherever I went. It was unnerving, sure, but the alley opened back onto a street I recognised. The second time I took it, I noticed something different. The walls had graffiti, but the tags weren't like the usual stuff. No names, no curse words, just symbols. Circles intersecting lines, strange geometric shapes. The kind of thing you could almost mistake for art if it didn't feel like the shapes were arranged with intent. By the third time, I started to realise the alley didn't look the same each night. Sometimes the pavement was cracked, sometimes it was smooth, sometimes the walls looked freshly painted, and other times they were peeling. But it was always quiet, too quiet. One Friday night, I left work close to midnight. I was exhausted and didn't want to walk the long way, so I headed straight for the alley. Halfway through, I saw someone standing against the wall. It was a man. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark coat that looked out of place. He looked like he was listening to something only he could hear. I slowed down, debating whether to turn back, but then he turned his head toward me. It wasn't all the way, just enough for me to see that his eyes didn't reflect the light. They weren't empty sockets or glowing or anything like that, just flat, dark, like staring into a windowless room. I kept walking, forcing myself not to break into a run. My ears rang with how silent it was. Even my own footsteps didn't echo. When I finally reached the end of the alley, I turned back, and the man was gone. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop picturing those flat eyes. I told myself I'd imagined it, that I was tired, that it was just some random guy. But I couldn't explain why I hadn't heard him move when he disappeared. The next week, I swore I wouldn't take the alley again, but habits are hard to break. On Tuesday, running late, I slipped into it again. Something was wrong immediately. The alley felt longer. I know how that sounds, but I'd walked enough times to know it shouldn't take me more than a minute to get through. This time, 5 minutes passed, and then 10. I kept waiting to see the street on the other side, but it never came. My chest tightened. I told myself maybe I'd zoned out, maybe I'd turned around without realising. But when I looked back, the entrance was gone too. Just more brick walls stretching on. I started walking faster, then jogging. My breath bounced at me in the still air, but my footsteps made no sound. Then I heard him. The man from before, his coat brushing against the wall as he walked. His steps slow, deliberate, keeping pace with me, even though I couldn't see him. I broke into a run. I don't know how long I went, minutes, maybe hours. The alley twisted and turned, but never ended. The walls closed in until I had to hunch my shoulders to keep them from brushing them. Finally, I stumbled out onto a street. It wasn't my street, it wasn't anywhere I recognised. The buildings were wrong, the cars looked decades old, and the air carried a smell I can't describe. Something sweet, but rotten underneath. A man was standing under a flickering street lamp. It wasn't the same one though. He was shorter, broader, but he did have the same flat eyes. He lifted his hand, pointing back toward the alley. When I turned around, it was gone. Just a wall of crumbling brick where the entrance had once been. I never found the alley again. I searched, retraced my steps, even looked at old maps of the city. Nothing. But sometimes when I walk home late, I'll see them symbols again, scrawled on dumpsters, painted under bridges, carved into the bark of the trees in the park. The same circles and lines, always arranged, just slightly different. Once, outside the shop, I found one drawn in chalk on the sidewalk. Inside the circle, in shaky handwriting, was a single word: return. I don't take shortcuts anymore. Not through alleys, not through side streets, not even through the park. But every so often, when I'm walking home, I'll hear footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, the coat brushing against the wall. When I turn around, there's no one ever there. This started a few months ago, though I didn't realise what I was walking into at the time. I take the late train home from work most nights. My shift ends after 10, so by the time I reach the station, it's mostly empty. It's just me, a handful of other commuters, and the occasional night worker grabbing a smoke outside the doors. That night, I remember clearly, because it was raining hard enough to blur the lights on the platform. I was sitting on the bench, scrolling my phone when I felt it. That prickling sense that someone's eyes are on you. I glanced up. Across the tracks, under the opposite shelter, stood a woman. She was tall, thin, dressed in a coat too light for the weather. Her dark hair hung in damp strands. She wasn't holding an umbrella, but she wasn't shivering. She wasn't pacing, or checking her phone, or glancing at the tracks. She was looking at me, not just casually. Her eyes were fixed on me. I looked away fast, pretending to keep scrolling, but I could feel it. That weight of her gaze pressing against me through the downpour. When the train finally pulled in, I got on without looking back. I told myself maybe she was just waiting. Maybe she was looking past me, not at me. But deep down I knew. She hadn't moved the whole time. 2 weeks later, I saw her again. It was a different night, clear and cold. I'd almost forgotten about her. But as I stepped onto the platform, my stomach dropped. It was the same woman, only this time, she was on my side of the tracks. She wasn't at the bench or near the shelter. She was standing at the far end of the platform, where the lights don't reach as well, her outline sharp against the dark. I slowed my walk, suddenly aware of how loud my footsteps sounded on the wet concrete. Her head shifted slightly. Not much, just enough that I knew she'd noticed me. And then she did something that made the hair on my arms stand on end. She started to walk. Not toward the edge, not toward the entrance, toward me. Her steps were slow, like she wasn't in a hurry, but also wasn't going to stop. I panicked and walked fast toward the shelter, fumbling with my phone, pretending to check messages. By the time I reached the covered bar, I risked a glance over my shoulder. She stopped, still halfway down the platform, standing in the dim light, watching. I stayed near a group of other commuters, pattern. Not every night, not even every week, but just often enough that I never felt safe stepping onto that platform again. Sometimes she'd be across the tracks, standing dead still, facing me. Sometimes she'd be on my side, closer than the time before. Once, I caught her standing at the bottom of the stairs that led up from the street. I nearly turned around and went home. She never smiled, never spoke, never tried to approach beyond those slow, deliberate steps. But every single time, she was watching. And I noticed something else, something I tried to convince myself wasn't real. But the more I thought about it, the more it chilled me. Her coat, it never looked wet, not once. Rain, snow, wind, it always hung on her frame perfectly, as though untouched by the weather around her. The last time I saw her was 3 nights ago. The station was emptier than usual, almost silent. I stood near the shelter, pretending to text, trying not to glance around too much. Then, out the corner of my eye, I saw movement. She was there, but she wasn't on the other side of the tracks. She wasn't at the far end of the platform. She was standing less than 30 feet away, directly under the light, facing me. Her head was tilted down just slightly, her hair hanging over her face, but I could see her mouth this time. She was whispering. I couldn't hear the words over the hum of the lights and the distant traffic, but I saw her lips move, slow, like she was reciting something. I froze. I wanted to move, but my legs wouldn't. Then, finally, the sound of the train rushed in from the tunnel, breaking the moment. I got on without thinking, half expecting her to follow, but she didn't. Through the window, as the train pulled away, I saw her, standing exactly where she'd been, still whispering, still facing me. And the worst part, I think she was saying my name. So that was the last story for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Until next time, take care.